What if your entire life changed in a single second, just because you saw heaven open? This is the story of a man who did. Welcome to Divine War Stories, where heavenly realms collide with human hearts. If you crave the supernatural, stay with us. The war is real, and you're in it. Isaiah wasn't just a prophet. He was a man standing at the edge of two realities, the brokenness of earth and the blinding holiness of heaven. The day everything changed, he wasn't looking for God, yet God came anyway. It was the year King Uzziah died. The kingdom was in turmoil, voices were uncertain, and leadership felt hollow. And in the middle of that national crisis, Isaiah was taken to a throne that made every earthly crown look like dust. He saw the Lord, high and lifted up. Not a whisper, not a symbol, but a blazing, terrifying glory seated on a throne above all power. The hem of his robe alone filled the entire temple. Just the hem. That's when the Seraphim appeared. Fiery, majestic, unlike anything the earth had ever seen. They hovered with 6 wings, covering their faces, their feet, and flying. Even they couldn't bear to look at the one they worshipped. And then came the sound, louder than war drums, deeper than thunder. They cried out to one another, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, the whole earth is full of his glory." This wasn't just a song. It was a vibration that shook the very foundations of the temple. Every stone trembled, every wall cracked with the echo of eternity. It wasn't just loud, it was alive. Holiness isn't silence. It's the most powerful sound in existence. And when Isaiah heard it, he didn't celebrate. He didn't dance. He collapsed. All illusions of being a good man vanished. All excuses melted. He cried, "Woe is me! I am undone. I am a man of unclean lips." In that moment, Isaiah saw the truth. You cannot stand near true purity without realizing your own ruin. Even his words, the very thing prophets were known for, were stained. But heaven doesn't just expose. It heals. As Isaiah stood shaking, drowning in the weight of his sin, one of the seraphim flew toward him. But not empty-handed. In his hand was a burning coal, fresh from the altar. Fire in heaven isn't like fire on earth. It doesn't destroy, it purifies. The angel pressed it to Isaiah's lips. Painful, yes. But not to torture, to cleanse. He said, "Behold, this has touched your lips, your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for." Isaiah didn't ask for mercy. He didn't earn forgiveness. But grace came anyway. That's how heaven works. It doesn't wait for your perfection. It meets you in your mess and calls you holy. That's when Isaiah heard the question, "Whom shall I send? Who will go for us?" God didn't speak directly to Isaiah. It was like a royal whisper, loud enough to be overheard. But the call wasn't forced. It was an invitation. One that required only one thing: willingness. And Isaiah, still trembling, now transformed, said the words that would define his entire legacy. "Here I am. Send me." He didn't ask for details. He didn't demand a sign. He simply responded. Because once you've been in the throne room, the only thing you want is to be part of its mission. Isaiah's yes wasn't born out of confidence, but surrender. And that yes echoed into generations. It shaped prophecies that still echo today, including the one that said a virgin would conceive and give birth to a savior. That's the strange beauty of divine encounters. They start with terror, but they end with purpose. Isaiah didn't come out glowing. He came out burning, changed, marked, different. The same mouth that once confessed impurity became the mouth that carried messages from the Most High. And maybe that's why this story matters today more than ever. Because we live in a world full of unclean words, broken systems, and empty thrones. But heaven is still holy. Seraphim still sing. And God still asks, "Who will go for us?" You don't need to be ready. You just need to be willing. Isaiah wasn't perfect. But he was present. And that was enough for God to use him. Maybe it's enough for God to use you too. When Isaiah stepped out of that divine vision, the world hadn't changed, but he had. The palace was still shaking, politics were still corrupt, and people were still afraid. But Isaiah walked with fire on his lips and vision in his eyes. He had seen something greater than kings, armies, or fear. He had stood in the presence of glory, and once you've been there, nothing else satisfies. He no longer spoke with uncertainty. His words carried the weight of heaven. And every time he opened his mouth, it was as if the coal still burned, whispering through every prophecy, every warning, every promise of restoration. That's what a real encounter with God does. It doesn't end in the moment. It marks you for a lifetime. The fire of the altar doesn't burn out, it burns through. And Isaiah wasn't just a man anymore. He was a mouthpiece of the divine. But that calling came with a price. Isaiah was sent to a people who wouldn't listen. His messages were deep, poetic, rich in vision, but also rejected, ignored, and mocked. God even told him ahead of time, "You will speak, but they won't hear. You will show, but they won't see." Imagine being called, anointed, and then told your mission would look like failure. But Isaiah kept going. Not because people responded, but because he had seen the King. That was his fuel. That's how you last when the world doesn't applaud. You don't rely on results. You rely on revelation. And that's the hidden war behind every prophet's life, obedience over outcome. It's not about who listens. It's about who sent you. And Isaiah had seen the sender. Over time, Isaiah's vision became more than a memory. It became a lens. He began to see glimpses of the future, not just judgment, but redemption. In the ruins of a rebellious people, he saw hope. In the silence of exile, he heard a coming Savior. For unto us a child is born. That famous line didn't come from politics or dreams. It came from the same man who once collapsed at the sight of God's throne. That's what makes Isaiah's story powerful. He wasn't just a preacher. He was a witness. He had been wrecked and rebuilt by heaven. And from that place, he could declare things no one else could imagine. He saw the suffering servant before Rome existed. He saw the cross before crucifixion was invented. He saw light rising out of darkness, because the fire never left him. But here's something we often miss. That burning coal didn't just cleanse Isaiah's guilt. It altered his identity. He wasn't just clean, he was commissioned. And many people today stop at forgiveness, thinking that's the end of the journey. But in God's kingdom, forgiveness is just the beginning. The altar doesn't just erase your past. It ignites your future. Isaiah didn't return to who he was. He became someone new, someone sent. And that's the quiet revolution of the burning coal. It doesn't make you better. It makes you useful. And usefulness in the hands of God is the most powerful force on earth. That's why demons tremble not at perfect people, but at purified ones. Maybe you've never seen Seraphim. Maybe your temple has never shaken. But the same God who sat on that throne is still seated now. The same fire that touched Isaiah's lips is still burning. And the same question still echoes in the silence: who will go for us? You don't need a title. You don't need a stage. You just need to say yes. Because the war is still on. The kingdom still advances. And heaven is still looking for voices. Not perfect ones. Just willing ones. Maybe that's you. Maybe you've been feeling the pull, not from this world, but from beyond it. That strange ache that whispers, you were made for more. That whisper has a name. It's the call of the throne. Isaiah answered it. Through fear. Through trembling. Through fire. And maybe that's what today is about. Not just watching a story, but stepping into one. Because every divine encounter invites a response. So what will yours be? Will you walk away unchanged, or will you stand in the smoke and say, "Here I am"? This isn't about religion. It's about reality. The throne is real. The fire is real. And the mission still burns. Isaiah wasn't the last. He was just the first to see what we now proclaim. The vision has already been given. The coal has already been lit. All that's left is your answer. If this story moved you, let it move through you. Let the fire pass from screen to spirit. Because heaven is calling again. Not in thunder, but in whisper. And someone, somewhere, needs your voice. So, as the seraphim sing, and the earth shakes, and the questions rise, maybe today's the day you stop running. Maybe today, you lift your hand and whisper back, "Send me." If this story stirred something inside you, Don't let it fade. Subscribe to Divine War Stories, where every video brings you closer to the unseen war and the unseen God who still calls warriors from ordinary lives. Your fire starts now.